everyone. We know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our show, ILTV's Weekly Review, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right here from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. Israeli leaders are standing with Britain today in the wake of what's now being investigated as an Islamist-related terror attack in London. Within just hours of the rampage in Westminster, Tel Aviv City Council was lit up by images of the Israeli flag and the Union Jack. 4 people were killed and 20 injured when the assailant plowed his car into pedestrians crossing Westminster Bridge and then stabbed a policeman near the British Parliament.
I think it's a great thing. Israel always are very close to the British people, and we all try to fight terror around the world. And I think what's happened tonight in London, it's a great shame. And I'm very proud that we put here on our building of the Mayor of Tel Aviv the English flag. I'm absolutely emotional about it, and I feel very strongly for the British people. And we are with them.
Israel has faced its own wave of terrorism since 2015 with repeated Palestinian car ramming, stabbing, and shooting assaults.
I think it's an amazing gesture of Tel Aviv to do such a thing like that. I think it's now people in London and England can feel how we feel almost every day when we have a lot of terror attacks here in Israel, and we never get support and we always get the blame. And now they can see that we also live in some sort of fear, and we want to get the mutual support. Like, we support them and we put a huge flag in the middle of Tel Aviv to support them, and Tel Aviv is here to support. And I hope next time when something will happen to us, they will know how to appreciate it and to support us as well.
The Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely and the Israeli ambassador to the UN are expressing Israel's deep shock over the London murders and is voicing the Jewish state's pledge to stand with Britain in a relentless battle against terror. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was aboard a flight home from China at the time of the attack and has yet to issue a formal response. This was the deadliest assault in the British capital since 2005, when 4 British Islamists killed 52 commuters and themselves in suicide bombings. Now here's some stunning news, and not in a good way. A dual U.S.-Israeli citizen has been arrested on suspicion of being the perpetrator behind almost all of the bomb threats targeting Jewish communities in the U.S., Europe, Australia, and New Zealand over the past 6 months. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on this story. Now, Aaron, can you give us some more details? This sounds outlandish.
Yeah, you actually won't believe this, but the Jerusalem Post is actually reporting that it was Israel's own investigators who tracked down the suspect and alerted international security and intelligence organizations. And let's check out my report for more. The 19-year-old is described as possibly suffering from psychological issues, and national police raided his home in the coastal city of Ashkelon earlier today. They also detained his father, who's being questioned over his son's possession of an unusual assortment of electronics equipment that may have been used to carry out the hoax campaign. The suspect is not serving in the Israeli army, despite his age as well. Officials announced their intention to indict the American immigrant here in Israel, although it's also possible that other countries will file extradition orders to prosecute him for the alleged crimes.
While it's still unknown exactly what kind of progress may have been achieved with the U.S. on Israeli settlement building, several reports are now emerging about what already appears to have been turned down. Local press is buzzing with reports that the U.S. presented several restrictions that totally took Israel off guard. Washington is said to have accepted building in the large settlement blocks as long as the expansion remains within an agreed-upon annual quota. While no new homes are to be added to isolated settlements, Washington's believed to have agreed to new homes in Jewish neighborhoods of East Jerusalem, as long as they're across the 1967 lines. Well, the Israeli government is apparently saying no to those terms. That's because the premier's right-wing coalition partners and members of his own Likud party oppose any kind of a settlement freeze. Plus, such an agreement with the U.S. would also prevent the government from honoring its pledge to build the first entirely new settlement for the evacuees of Amona, which was part of the deal when the illegal outpost was destroyed last month. Negotiations with Washington are still ongoing in the meantime, though, so we'll all just have to wait and see what's been worked out. The most recent findings about Israeli settlement construction are making waves today, and that's because the numbers show there's been a significant rise in Jewish building in the West Bank over the last year. According to the country's Central Bureau of Statistics, last year's approval of 2,630 housing units in the territory reflects a 40% increase in building from 2015. The Anti-Settlement Peace Now group says this shows the second highest acceleration in the last 15 years. They also claim it sends a clear message to the Palestinians and to the international community that Israel's not interested in reaching a peace deal based on a two-state solution. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that there's been significant progress in talks with Washington about further building. No new plans have been announced since U.S. President Donald Trump asked the premier to hold off on building when the two met in February. But the two sides have been working toward the creation of a mechanism to resolve the issue since that time. All right, there's been a huge diplomatic spat going on at the United Nations after one of its agencies issued a report accusing Israel of practicing apartheid against the Palestinians. Now, the dust is settling after the head of the responsible commission, known as ESCWA, resigned following what she claims was pressure from the Secretary General to withdraw the report. Rima Khalaf is a Jordanian national who serves as an undersecretary of the world body. She also heads the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, which made the apartheid slur against the Jewish state.
تصر أهمية هذا التقرير على أنه الأول من نوعه الذي يصدر عن إحدى هيئات الأمم المتحدة ويخلص بوضوح وصراحة إلى أن إسرائيل هي دولة عنصرية قد أنشأت نظام أبرتايد يضطهد الشعب الفلسطيني. بل إن أهميته تكمن كذلك في تسليطه الضوء على جوهر قضية الشعب الفلسطيني وشروط تحقيق السلام.
The Lebanon-based agency is comprised of 18 Arab states who issued the report without consulting headquarters in New York. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres then insisted the publication be withdrawn.
فطلبت منه أن يراجع موقفه فأصر عليه. وبناء على ذلك تقدمت إليه باستقالتي من الأمم المتحدة.
Israel has fiercely rejected the allegation of apartheid and is likening the ESCWA report to anti-Semitic Nazi propaganda. The United States has also reacted with outrage, and the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, is blasting the accusation as untrue and defamatory.
وقد كان متوقعا بالطبع أن تقوم إسرائيل وحلفاؤها بممارسة ضغوط هائلة على الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة للتنصل من التقرير وأن يطلبوا منه سحبه. وقد أصدر الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة تعليماته لي صباح الأمس بسحبه.
But the Secretary General's office is strongly denying Khalaf's statements.
This is about process. The Secretary General cannot accept that an Undersecretary General or any other senior UN official that reports to him would authorize the publication under UN name, under the UN logo, without consulting the competent departments and even himself. This is not about pressure. This is about the Secretary General having the authority to manage the organization in a way that is done effectively and can deliver on its goals.
Israel's UN ambassador Dani Danan says Khalaf's resignation was long overdue, and Washington is calling it appropriate. Ambassador Haley is also insisting that UN agencies do a better job of eliminating false and biased work, and applauded the Secretary General's decision to distance his good office from the Anti-Israel Report. Syrian reports are claiming that Israeli jets carried out even more airstrikes near Damascus this morning. The allegations come just hours after the Israeli Prime Minister vowed to continue hitting weapon convoys that are making their way to Hezbollah, even though Russia has ordered Israel to suspend airstrikes. ILTV's Aaron Porras joins us with more. Aaron?
Thank you, Natasha. The strikes took place just outside the mountains in Damascus. and Jerusalem has yet to comment on the airstrikes, as is per usual. There's also been no word on casualties or damages, but let's look at my report for more. The airstrike followed fierce clashes where pro-Assad forces were reported to have shelled and conducted airstrikes against opposition fighters, including the Fateh al-Sham front formerly associated with al-Qaeda. Lately, Israeli-Syrian tensions have been escalating, as Israel is alleged to have carried out a similar airstrike Sunday night targeting weapons convoys, and is believed to have been behind a drone strike killing a senior pro-Assad militant 2 days ago. On Friday, an Israeli airstrike in Syria narrowly missed a Russian asset, prompting Moscow to summon the Israeli envoy following the incident. The Prime Minister has denied that Moscow has asked him to halt airstrikes within Syria, though, and has stated that Israel reserves the right to strike at weapons convoys and Iranian military targets in Syria. Throughout the Syrian civil war, the embattled Assad regime has been continuously propped up by the Lebanese terror group Hezbollah and the Islamic Iran and Russia.
Israel has just approved a law restricting non-governmental organizations from funding political campaigns. The bill is considered to be highly controversial because social action groups fear it will prevent them from getting the funding that they need. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on the story. Aaron?
All right, well, the bill passed with a vote of 41 in favor to 27 against. And it basically started in response to the last election where an organization called V15 actively tried to oust Prime Minister Netanyahu. They actually were working tirelessly against him. Incidentally, the V15 organization, which was funded by another NGO, was then funded itself by the President Obama administration.
I remember when we covered that. Let's check out your report.
The Prime Minister supported the bill in its original form after the V15 organization waged an intensive campaign to oust him during the last election. Proponents of the bill say it's designed to make it harder for wealthy individuals to circumvent financing laws in order to invest large sums of money to influence Knesset elections. However, social action groups and other civil society organizations fear that law will make it harder for them to raise funds and promote various public campaigns. A number of controversial provisions were dropped from the final legislation, including a clause that would have prevented restrictions on donors to media outlets that supported a specific candidate, and another one that would have prevented organizations from transporting candidates to polling stations. The last clause was dropped because it was seen as disproportionately affecting Arab and ultra-Orthodox voters.
It's only been 2 years since the last national elections in Israel, but a brewing disagreement in the coalition may now bring about another round of balloting in the near future. The heart of the matter is whether to open a new public television station in place of the existing IBA Israel Broadcasting Authority. The closure would mean the loss of jobs for over 1,000 employees. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reversed his position on the closure over the weekend, which puts him at odds with his key political partner, Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon. Netanyahu is now digging in and even suggesting that if the impasse isn't resolved, he may be willing to call new elections over the issue. The IBA workers are staging nearly nonstop demonstrations to save their jobs. Here's what one had to say about the potential early balloting.
Yes, there's a big chance that the government is going to fall over this issue and what it represents.
The finance minister is maintaining silence, but as a prime minister, Netanyahu flew off to China for a 3-day official visit. He insisted that his government must follow the lead of his ruling Likud party.
ממשלה מתקיימת על סמך הסכמים קואליציוניים. בהסכם הקואליציוני נקבע במפורש שכל המפלגות מחויבות להחלטות של הליכוד שלנו בנושא התקשורת, לרבות סגירת התאגיד.
For now, talk of a coalition crisis and possible early elections are dominating Israeli newspaper headlines as commentators scramble to decipher the premier's next move. The terrorist who brutally murdered the American teen Ezra Schwartz and 2 others has now been given 4 life sentences by an Israeli military court. ILTV's Aaron Porras has a report on the story.
Mohammed Abed Odu Harub is the name of the murderer who killed Schwartz, along with Yaakov Dan, aged 51, and Shadi Arafa, aged 24. Harub opened fire on the victims from inside a vehicle at a Etzion junction in the West Bank in November 2015. Harub has also been ordered to pay the families of each victim $200,000. Schwartz was in Israel on a gap year program studying at Yeshiva Shreinu in Bet Shemesh. He was killed whilst delivering snacks to Israeli soldiers stationed in the West Bank. Yaakov Dan was a longtime teacher and resident of Alon Shvut, and Shadi Arafa was a Palestinian resident of Hebron. They too were victims of Harub's shooting attack.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's three-day official visit to Beijing is having some phenomenal results. I mean, at this point, it's really hard to underestimate the immense level of cooperation that should be taking place between China and Israel. Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang gave the visiting Israeli leader a very warm welcome, showcasing a full honor guard and even getting a military band to play both the Israeli and Chinese national anthems. Both leaders are paying tribute to the great progress in bilateral relations since diplomatic ties were founded 25 years ago. Plus, they're vowing to further strengthen cooperation in a wide realm of fields other than just trade and industry, such as education, tourism, and cultural exchanges.
I think there's a natural marriage in the questions of clean air, clean water and available water, food, transportation, communications, and the last area, which I think is absolutely critical, which is health. With new technology, we can make people live longer, personalize their medicine, prevent a lot of the diseases that are available. All of that is happening in exciting ways in Israel, and we're very excited about trying to bring this technology to China for the betterment of everybody.
In terms of political matters, Li is expressing Beijing's wish to work with Jerusalem and the international community to attain peace and stability in the Middle East.
中方呢，在中东问题上没有私利，我们坚定地支持在联合国有关决议和国际共识性原则的基础上，推进中东和平进程，早日解决巴以问题。
The Israeli premier says he appreciates a constructive role China plays in the peace process. After their talks, Netanyahu and Li witnessed a document signing ceremony to expand mutual trade, science and technology, commerce, and civil aviation initiatives. The free trade agreement between the two innovative nations is expected to be finalized this coming July. All right, it's hard for most nations to imagine, but today Israelis are expressing relief over the news that not a single citizen was killed in a terror attack coming from the Gaza Strip this past year. And that's all thanks to the tireless vigilance by the nation's Shin Bet security service. It's basically a good news, bad news scenario because 16 Israelis and one foreign national were still killed in terror attacks, only those incidents were perpetrated by West Bank or Israeli Arabs. The latest assessment comes from the Shin Bet chief Nadav Algaman during his yearly review to the Knesset. Even though no Israeli deaths were caused by Palestinian terrorist activities from Gaza, there were still lots of attempted attacks. The chief is stressing that Hamas and other Islamist extremists have in fact significantly increased their campaign to instigate mass casualty attacks in Israel every day. But they've just relocated their efforts to the West Bank. That's why the Shin Bet has been stepping up its crackdown in the area. 1,035 suspected Hamas members were arrested and 114 terror cells were dismantled this past year. The Shin Bet alone succeeded in stopping 344 major attacks by more than 400 potential terrorists. This includes 184 shooting attacks, 16 attempted suicide bombings, 86 stabbings or vehicle rammings, and 16 abductions. An untold number of other attacks were thwarted by the army and the national police. Guests are already checking in at the quirky guest house in Bethlehem called the Walled Off Hotel, which offers the worst view possible for a very important reason. The British street artist Banksys is behind the controversial building, which he's hoping will promote peace by forcing guests to stare at the barrier between Israel and the West Bank. The three-story hotel was inaugurated a few weeks ago, but it's only now open for overnight reservations.
Today is the official opening for the Waldorf Hotel in Bethlehem. We are expecting 18 guests to arrive this afternoon from different parts of the world, from the United Kingdom, United States, Switzerland, Sweden, Australia, and Finland. This will be the first night stay for them in our hotel.
The guest house stands just a few feet away from the security barrier Israel built during the Second Palestinian Intifada to prevent the entry of suicide bombers and other terrorists. Locals and their supporters regularly protest against its presence, and the hotel's construction was kept secret for more than a year. Its interior is decorated with Banksys' works reflecting the conflict, and it's the only accommodation in the world that advertises no views because all the rooms face the nearly 16-foot high graffiti-covered concrete wall.
The hotel with the worst view, that that's quite interesting, and it's quite unique actually. And along with Banksys' art and everything else, that's why I want to come here and visit.
There are 10 rooms ranging from a budget barrack-style accommodation for backpackers to a presidential suite that can sleep 6. The venue also has a low-lit bar and restaurant featuring a motif reminiscent of British colonial times. But it's undoubtedly the collection of ironic artworks that seems to attract visitors.
Actually, it's my second time. Last time was last week. The first time was quite exciting. I checked out half of the hotel, the gallery, and everything. And so this time, I'm looking forward to check out the exhibitions and I think the museum.
Christians are celebrating because a site they revere as Jesus' tomb in Jerusalem's Old City has just been reopened for visitation. The venerated burial place in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been closed for critical renovations for the past 9 months. Disputes between the many Christian denominations that have custody over the site have held up restoration for more than 200 years. Work only got underway after the house of worship was deemed to be unsafe by Israeli authorities. Greek Orthodox, Armenian, and Roman Catholic members of the clergy were all present at the reopening ceremony.
This restoration of the sacred edicule is not only a gift to our Holy Land, but to the whole world. The unity that is demonstrated in this restoration must be an inspiration to the peoples of our region, especially in times when our world is experiencing unfathomable difficulties and confusion.
Each of the denominations contributed toward the $3.3 million restoration project. King Abdullah of Jordan also made a personal donation. Reinforcement and conservation work at the ancient site was carried out by a team of scientists and antiquities experts. Now that it's finally safe for visitors, Christians are already lining up for their own personal glimpses of the ornamental tomb they believe once held the body of their Savior.
The restoration as a pilgrim it just reinforces how important this is to everyone of every faith, and it's so exciting to be a part of it.
Christians believe that the site on which the church stands is where Jesus was crucified, entombed, and resurrected. Well, it's just become official. The wandering Israeli basketball star Omri Casspi is no longer without a team. It looks like he's just signed on to the NBA's Minnesota Timberwolves. After launching his illustrious sports career with the championship Maccabi Tel Aviv team, Casspi became the first Israeli athlete to ever play in the U.S. National Basketball Association. This latest deal marks the 5th team the 6'9" forward has joined since being drafted back in 2009, and that includes 3 teams just this past month. He was traded by the Sacramento Kings to the New Orleans Pelicans, but just got waived after breaking his thumb in his debut game. Now Caspi's returning to the court with the Timberwolves pack in time for 13 games left in the regular season. At this point, you really need a scorecard just to keep up with this unstoppable Israeli rebounder. A new poll has just determined that Israel is the 11th happiest country in the world, which makes it kind of hard to understand why respondents in another study say they'd leave the country if they had the chance. Let's start with the positive survey, which was conducted by the United Nations using 6 primary factors to determine happiness levels. They include gross domestic product per capita, social support, a healthy life expectancy, individual freedom, generosity, and perceptions of corruption. Norway topped the annual list, followed by Denmark, Iceland, and Switzerland, but tiny little Israel did come in as the world's 11th happiest country for the 2nd year in a row. That means it's risen 3 spots higher on the chart than back in 2012. The US, by the way, came out 14th, Germany the 16th, and even the United Kingdom placed 19th this year. The saddest nations include Tanzania, Burundi, the Central African Republic, and Syria. But as happy as Israel's supposed to be, an internal governmental poll just found out that 27% of all Israeli Jews say they'd leave if they could. Among secular Jews, that number rises to 36%. And interestingly, only 7% of religious Jews say they'd go. Now, perhaps not so surprisingly, when asked if they see themselves as Israeli or Jewish first, 44% of the non-religious group said Israeli, while 90% of the religious crowd said Jewish. That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of ILTV's Weekly Review. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.